There's an assumption that if you really wanted something so badly, you would be motivated to go out and get it. And if you're not motivated, then all of a sudden the conversation becomes about discipline. But what if neither of those are what you really need in the moment? No one really talks about the in between, the part where motivation and discipline just don't fit the current situation. Welcome to season 2, episode 3 of She's Probably Talking to Other Guys. I'm your host, Annie of the Banannie Diaries, and today's episode is assumptions about motivation versus discipline and why neither of them are really the hero or the villain.
Just a friendly reminder, I am not a therapist, psychologist, or expert in human behavior. This is a judgment-free, assumption-checking zone. Take what resonates and leave the rest.
We're starting off first with an assumption, and this is an assumption that tends to come up in the topic of motivation versus discipline, and it would be that motivation is for beginners and discipline is for serious people. Both of them are tools, and they can both be used in a really beneficial way, but they can also be misused as well, depending on what season of your life that you find yourself in. So let's talk a little bit about motivation first. First of all, there are so many conversations about motivation, the right ways to use it, the wrong ways to use it, and this and that. And honestly, let's just do a quick little reframe about maybe what motivation can be in a softer idea. So motivation can work really well when your curiosity is very high. In a previous episode, I mentioned about how in my life, I've found that action tends to result in motivation appearing, which would also start to make me bring in this topic of curiosity, because if I tried something, then I got motivated to really continue focusing on this or to continue working on whatever it might be. Then all of a sudden, I've reached this point of curiosity because I've made the action, I have some motivation now, and a lot of that is coming from the curiosity of where this could go if I keep going along or if I keep going down this path of whatever it might be that I'm currently working on. Now, let's flip that and go to discipline. So personally, I found that discipline works when there's already a structure in place, when you already maybe have a schedule written down or you already have a game plan of how you're going to achieve whatever it is. So you made an action, motivation showed up, now comes discipline. We need to try to create a set structure for how this is going to happen. Yes, there are always moments where things can just appear, opportunities can just happen, but I also feel like when that happens, there was still work done that made that opportunity appear. And whether it was structured or not, that's a different story, but we're not really talking about opportunities that quote unquote like fall from the sky. We're talking more about you choosing to pursue something. Let's use dance as an example. We have routines that we use. When we want to work on something, we focus on, okay, well, what is the element that we're trying to make better? How does it fit in our routine? And then we make a plan for how we're going to actually make this piece of the routine work better. We don't just start working on it and not know what we're trying to change about it or what we're trying to improve about it. We need to know what the end game is, what our goal is, in order to create discipline that's actually going to produce results. I can be disciplined about something for the longest time, and it could never produce results simply because I didn't know what my end game was. We're going to talk about a conversation that sometimes can lead to us creating some negative thoughts about ourselves or maybe even others if we're watching a situation unfold from the outside. So the thought that we're going to talk about for a second is we assume that the problem is effort when most of the time it's context. So for example, assumptions. If I'm not achieving that thing I'm working on, I mustn't want it enough. If I'm inconsistent, I must be lazy or undisciplined. If I'm stuck, I must need to push harder. The first place we tend to look is the effort that we're putting into whatever this thing is that we're trying to achieve. But it might not always be the effort. It might be the environment that you're trying this thing in. It might be the timing. There are just so many more outside factors that can contribute it to just the amount of effort that you're putting into something. Context is not an excuse, right? We're not making excuses as to why something's not happening. And I am going to throw in some quotes that I know I hear all the time, or at least they kind of circulate on social media often. And those are about, a flower's not going to bloom in the wrong environment. Right? That's why plants have instructions. So we know what environment they need to be in order to thrive. Otherwise, they're just not going to. And if you've had experience being a plant parent, then when those mistakes happen and now your plant is no longer. The idea is that, again, they're not excuses. It's about trying to set yourself up in the best way possible. And not everyone can start in an ideal environment. That's the other thing to keep in mind. There are so many small businesses that start out in people's homes. There are so many podcasts that start out in people's bedrooms or in their basement or wherever they can possibly find space. So this isn't about feeling bad if you're not able to do something on, let's say, like a larger scale or a typical scale for whatever it might be. This isn't about feeling bad if you're in an environment that you can't get out of right now. It's just about recognizing what could be contributing to something not working and then doing what you can to fix it or adjust it in the moment. So context can include what your current mental load is. How overwhelmed are you? What are you thinking about? What's going on in your life? Emotional state can be another one. The season of your life that you're in. There are different seasons that people are in. It can be energy, not motivation. You can have external pressure versus internal desire for something. And then also, there's something to consider if the goal still fits what you want or who you are in the moment. When you blame something on effort, we're just going to use some example phrases. Kind of a phrase could be, I just need to try harder. That is directly related to effort. If you consider that in a context framing, maybe it's, I'm trying to build something new while I'm exhausted, overstimulated, or grieving a version of myself from the past. So when it comes to applying discipline, sometimes it takes considering these outside pieces or the rest of the context of whatever's happening in order to actually put discipline in a productive way. There is something to be said for trying to push through while you're grieving. There is something to be said for trying to push through while you are just completely overwhelmed. And everyone is going to be different. Some people are still going to perform at their highest level even when they're grieving. And it doesn't mean that they're not feeling it. Maybe that's just their method of coping with it. Some people aren't going to be able to continue at all, and that's okay too. And then you're going to have people who are kind of in the middle. I'm someone where I kind of fit in the middle with that. There have been times where I've lost someone or I've lost a pet, and I had to keep going in some kind of capacity. And I ended up realizing that honestly, I could just do what I could do. There, being a dancer, there's moments when I hear a song and it reminds me of someone. And sometimes I have to try my best to just keep it all bottled up inside until I am somewhere where I can just let it out for a few minutes and then go back to whatever needs to be done. So again, there's so many different concepts of what this could actually mean. And there's a lot of different ways that people cope with these context puzzle pieces. And it's all individual. No one's the same. And I feel that it's very important to recognize that there's no right or wrong way to do it. If you're next to, I'm just going to say coworker, just to pick a word. If your coworker is one of those people who can still function at a really high, pretty much normal level for them, even though they're in the middle of grieving, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you if you can't operate the same way. You're not the same person. And I think that that's something really important to recognize, is that just because so and so is able to do that way, it doesn't mean that you have to do it a certain way. I like the phrase of giving yourself grace. If you're having a really hard day, it doesn't mean that everything that you've ever done is erased now. You can give yourself a moment. Maybe instead of 100% today, you need to work at 90%, and that's okay. Because when you look at, I know they pop up on my social media, little grids almost, or little charts people make of, this is my energy on Monday, this is Tuesday, this is Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and they're all different. They're not all at 100% every day, because that tends to be, one, it's relatable. Two, I always find that that tends to be pretty accurate, at least for my life. I know I wake up on one day and it's just one thing after another. And then the next day, everything is, sunshine and we're good to go. And then again, the next day, oh, we just have all of this happening. And I just think that it's important to acknowledge what's going on and then adjust whatever it is you need to work on based on your current situation. When effort starts to become part of the question in this motivation and discipline conversation, sometimes it can be very easily turned into a feeling of shame almost. And it can turn into guilt. It can turn into self-doubt. You can start overcorrecting yourself. It can turn into a burnout cycle. Effort tends to relate to a personal failure, which I think it's very important, yes, to recognize the amount of effort you're putting into something. I think the amount of effort, at least my belief, is that effort can be related to how much you really want something. So if I'm going to put 100% of my effort into something, it's because I really want it. In my life, the times where I noticed that I didn't really choose to put 100% effort into things, maybe I did in the beginning, and then along the way I realized, this really isn't my vibe. This isn't what I'm going for. These aren't the people that I want to be around. Then I would make adjustments and actually recognize, okay, if I don't really want to put effort in, or I'm not really excited to pour my heart and soul into something, I know that that's a sign that I don't want it that badly. So for me, I've recognized that when I really want something, I pour my heart and soul into it. And when it's the opposite and I don't really want something, I might not know right away that I don't want it, but I start to not necessarily put in all of the effort that I would for something that I know I really want without a doubt. Discipline is not wrong to have, motivation's not wrong to have. The misalignment of the two in relation to the context, in relation to the situation in the moment, that's where the problem might lie for discipline and motivation to be working well together. Let's talk about awareness and how awareness can help us to, one, find the motivation, two, create the discipline, and three, understand what our goal actually is. So to understand what it's going to take to achieve what we really want. So let's talk about shifting from judging ourselves in terms of effort, or however you find that you're judging yourself, and turn it into curiosity. So thinking about, what season am I actually in? There's exploration, building, maintenance, recovery. They can also be called different things too. But there's different seasons that you may or may not notice that you're going through. You might also want to ask, what am I asking of myself right now? So I know what my goal is. What am I asking myself to do in order to achieve it? And then, does this goal still make sense in this context? So again, simple idea. If I have a plant and the only place that I have to put this plant is in a corner in the dark, is my plant even going to grow? Depending on what plant it is, Probably not. But again, just a very simple explanation there. Just a very simple example. Effort, of course, your effort is going to matter. The effort that you're going to put into it will matter. I'm going to use dancing again as an example. If there have been students who wanted to win, that was their goal. They wanted to win, but they never practiced. Right there, that's where your effort is going to become part of the problem. That's not going to be because of the situation. That's not going to be because of context. That's going to be because they chose to not put effort into their goal of becoming a champion or winning, something like that. So let's get rid of the assumption that if something isn't working, it's because you're not trying hard enough, right? That assumption needs to go away. We need to approach it from a concept of, did something change? Have the conditions or the context changed while I've been working on this? Maybe do I still want it as bad as I wanted it initially? We need to start noticing things like that. So becoming aware of what's actually happening, what's actually shifting, what's actually changing. The awareness is what's going to help us continue in a productive way. Let's discuss the seasons in a bit more depth. Exploration season, right? Maybe you find that it's motivation in the form of curiosity. You're just playing around with an idea, seeing if maybe this is something you want to pursue. It's low pressure, right? You're just exploring. You're just trying to figure out if maybe this is something that you want. You have building season. That's going to be your discipline. That's going to be where your routines kick in, the repetition kicks in, and where your structure is really going to be important. This is the portion where we would hope that you start to see and notice and maybe feel, depending on what it is, some of the results of what you're working on. So next up, we have maintenance season. Maintenance means, okay, we've reached a spot where we just need to continue working on what we've been working on. Maybe not necessarily introducing anything new right now. Maybe we're just trying to keep going. We're just trying to continue the momentum or the motivation that we've built. But the maintenance season is really just exactly what it says. It is trying to maintain everything that we've already achieved within whatever thing we are chasing right now. And there's, of course, recovery season too. And you have to make sure that you're giving yourself time to recover from whatever it might be. In ballroom dancing or physical activities, that can mean physical recovery, taking care of yourself, making sure that you're doing all of the things that will support you to function at your highest. Recovery can look different for so many people. And just because we're approaching it as a season doesn't mean that it's not necessarily consistent, but I do find that a lot of times there are, some breaks that tend to happen throughout different seasons or throughout different goals that we're working on. For example, we just came off the holidays. A lot of times for the holidays, there are businesses that have decided that they're closing for 2 weeks through the holidays to just let their employees and everyone who works for them just go and enjoy or go and recover or take some time. And however the recovery season looks in your life, it is important in achieving your goal. In the theme of the recovery season, when it comes to assumptions, this is where assumptions about being lazy or unmotivated or lack of effort can kick in. But I mentioned this in a previous episode that when the battery on your phone is low, you need to charge it in order for the battery to pick up again. And it's a similar situation for yourself. You need to find things that help you to recharge your energy, to get you excited about things again. Maybe just give yourself a quick little break of pushing and pushing and pushing. And it's not lazy. It's okay if it doesn't look impressive to people on the outside. They don't matter. What you're doing and what you're working on is what matters. We're going to discuss discipline for a moment. So discipline can be supportive or it can be self-punishing. It depends on where it's coming from. So if your discipline is fueled by shame or by telling yourself that you're not putting enough effort in, it's not necessarily going to create the momentum you need to keep going because it's not coming from a place where maybe your discipline is fueled by clarity or your discipline is fueled by what you have in your mind for what you're trying to achieve. If it's not fueled by something not necessarily positive, but something productive, or if it's not fueled by your desire to want something, something along those lines, that's when your discipline isn't necessarily going to be beneficial for you. Now, motivation, it's not that motivation is unreliable. It's just that sometimes I think we give motivation too much credit. Sometimes people think that motivation is all they need in order to achieve something, and motivation alone is not going to make you achieve something. Not necessarily, of course. There's always exceptions. The thing with motivation is that we can't assume that it's going to carry us through our entire project or our entire goal because the discipline and the structure, and again, all of that needs to come into play in order for it to work. Your motivation's great to give you a little spark of energy, but your motivation's not going to be enough to get you through the entire goal. Something that I want to bring up because I can personally relate to this is kind of a quiet assumption that maybe not everybody wants to admit out loud, but there's an assumption that if you're slowing down or you slow down, that you're falling behind. But sometimes slowing down is actually how you stop yourself from quitting, or maybe it's how you find the motivation to keep going again. Maybe it's where you discover that the little spark you had related to a topic comes back. And again, I can speak from a personal level on this that when I stepped away from a situation that was just not going where I wanted it to go, it was not beneficial, it was not productive for me anymore. When I took a step back, that was where I found clarity in what I wanted to do and what I wanted my next move to be. That was kind of how I found my spark for, okay, I do miss it, but I only miss certain aspects of it. So how can I get those aspects back into my life without getting the ones that I don't want back? And again, I think it's something that is very personal. And if you haven't been through it yourself, it's easy to not really understand the concept of how slowing down can actually get us ahead. All I can tell you is that I did, and I'm so incredibly happy that I did. When it comes to slowing down, I'm not someone where I believe that it means that you've failed or it means that you've done a bad job at something or you haven't put enough effort in. I think that slowing down is a way that you can evaluate what you've been doing, what you've been working on, and reframe your discipline if you need to. You know, it gives you a chance to look at things from an outside perspective and determine, okay, well, this worked, but this didn't work. Maybe if I bring this in, maybe this could help me as well. And again, to each their own. I found really the next chapter of my life from slowing down. That may not be the case for everyone, but I have found that the reflection was exactly what I needed. That it had nothing to do with the effort that I was putting in all along. It had nothing to do with the work that I had put in. It just had to do with, again, the context of what was happening around me, where I was, things related to that. And stepping away is what helped me to embark on a new journey. And again, I hope that if you're struggling with something, that you can evaluate it and figure out how to keep going, especially if it really is something that you really want to achieve. You know, if it's competitive, no, competitive sports are not easy. You know, they're tricky and there's a lot involved. If you're trying something new for the first time, if you're branching out into a new category that you've never been in, I mean, those are all situations that can be intimidating, and it's just about finding your way that works for you when you're moving into something new or trying something new. Maybe you just need a little motivation again to keep going through what you're currently going through. And again, you can find that sometimes in reflecting. If nothing else is working, maybe you can pinpoint what the issue is and then find a solution from there. Today was about motivation and discipline don't have to be the hero. They also don't have to be the villain. Everything coming together tends to help produce productive results. Of course, not always, as I've said before, the universe is going to help you in ways that it sees fit. It's going to give you opportunities when you've put the work in and the timing is just right. And those are all things that we can't control. But what you can control is figuring out what you want to try, seeing if you're getting some motivation there, putting in the discipline that feels right, and just trying your best. You don't need more motivation. You don't need more discipline. You just need permission to start using the tools that are going to be most beneficial to you while you're in this period of chasing your dreams. Thank you so much for tuning in. Follow She's Probably Talking to Other Guys on Spotify. We're also on iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts. If this resonated, share it with someone who puts too much pressure on themselves. You never know who needs it.